Is League of Legends dying? That is a question that people bring up all the time. Anytime that there's a giant controversy, like most recently with the whole sandbox mode thing that everyone on Reddit is yelling about how the game is literally unplayable because Riot's not currently working on a sandbox mode. That's something that I think is a bit of an overreaction, but a lot of people always like to ask, is League dying? Especially whenever one of these controversies come up and it feels like everyone that goes on Reddit doesn't really play League anymore. Everyone just goes to complain about League, when everyone on community websites say that League sucks now and how they hate League of Legends and how they hate Riot and Riot is taking this game and ruining it. And a lot of people like to say, is League dying, or that League is dying, and they draw a logical conclusion from that. If League of Legends is so trash, it must be dying. I don't think that that's a really good thing to talk about. I think that's much too sensationalist, and if you want me to just sort of answer the question, is the league dying? The answer is no, it's not dying at all. But I think that does have like a bit of an interesting underlying question of, how sustainable is League of Legends? How long will League be around for? Can we expect it to be around for maybe 10 more years, or 50 more years, or 100 more years, or just one more year? Like, how long will League be around for? And I think that's a really interesting question to ask, because it's not something anyone can really answer, not only because nobody can see the future, but nobody really knows how long video games, any video game, will be around for, any video game that's currently popular. Today we're going to sort of talk about this a little bit, though. Let's go ahead and first talk about video games in general. It's really interesting to look at video games and think, how long will they last? I mean, looking at anything related to the internet and asking how long can it last? Can this last all throughout my lifetime? Like me doing YouTube. YouTube has not been around for an entire lifetime, so no one has tried being a YouTuber their entire life, but that's something that a lot of YouTubers wonder. Can I do this for all my life? But nobody knows because it hasn't been around that long. That's a similar thing with video games. Take a look at Halo. Take a look at Call of Duty, Final Fantasy, even Mario. Games have been around for a really long time, and some of these popular game franchises have sustained throughout all of these years, despite the fact that a lot of these games are just sort of rehashed with a new coat of paint. I mean, Mario and Final Fantasy have been around since the 80s, so that maybe they've gone through a number of different iterations, and a lot of those games are different from each other, so maybe those aren't good examples. But take a look at Halo and Call of Duty. Those games have been around since early 2000. I think Halo was 2003, Call of Duty 2001. Maybe I'm getting those mixed up. Halo 2001 and Call of Duty 2003. That's when those games came out, so they've been around for almost 15 years, more than a decade, and that is something that's really interesting to think about. I mean, more than a decade, those shooters have been popular, even though they don't really introduce that much new stuff into them. They're just sort of, people love to say Call of Duty's just the same game, but remade with a new coat of paint every year, and then released with small changes, a game that is very consistent throughout the years, kind of, I mean, in different ways, but those games are still, they have massive fan bases is the point, and they have stayed relevant despite the fact that they have been around for quite a while. That's the thing that's really interesting to talk about, but okay, maybe those games are too different. Maybe it's, those games have single-player campaigns, even if the Call of Duty ones are shit. Those games have single-player campaigns that we can't really talk about. League has no single-player campaign. Let's go ahead and compare League to other online multiplayer games. Let's talk about Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike, same deal. It's been around since 1999, right? That's when Counter-Strike first showed up. It has been around for a long time, and it is still remaining super popular, right? It is a mostly online multiplayer game currently, right? And it's had certain levels of popularity throughout the years. Like 1.6 is what everyone says is the best build of Counter-Strike ever, right? A lot of people say that even now CSGO is still nowhere near as good as 1.6 was, which I do not know enough about Counter-Strike to comment on that, so I apologize for my ignorance. But the point is, even though it's had varying levels of popularity, it is still incredibly popular, especially nowadays. I mean, it is one of the 3 biggest esports. I don't know how popular Counter-Strike is compared to Dota 2, but they're probably pretty close. It might be the 2nd biggest esport, only behind League of Legends in the world. That's a really big accomplishment for a game that's 15 years old. So that's definitely an interesting thing to think about, right? I mean, a lot of these games have been popular ever since their inception, or they've at least had some sort of fan base ever since their inception, and they have existed for a very long time. So who knows when those games will die? And if League of Legends lasts as long as them, then League will be around for quite a while, many more years to come. League is still only 6 years old, right? Or maybe 7 years old if you count the beta. I mean, it's not been around as long as those games have been, and that's something to really think about, right? I mean, it's definitely a different example, but a different experience, and if we're comparing League to those games, it can definitely be around for quite a while. But anyway, I think an interesting thing to talk about, and I apologize it took me 5 minutes to get to this, but League of Legends, when people say, is the League dying, they aren't really asking how sustainable can MOBAs be, right? Nobody's really saying, are MOBAs just a fad that are eventually going to die out? Has League already gone over some sort of peak where MOBAs are just going to get less popular, they aren't going to get more popular anymore, and eventually die out? People are asking, is Riot doing something to ruin League, or can Riot kill off League? And the answer to that is unfortunately yes. Riot can definitely kill off League, and not even intentionally. They can do it just with willful negligence, the same way Blizzard did to StarCraft 2. Some of you might be wondering why I took so long to talk about StarCraft 2 when comparing League to other online games that have become esports over the years. StarCraft 2 is a perfect example. StarCraft 2 is, I apologize to any StarCraft 2 fans out there, but it's a game that's pretty much dead at this point. At one point, it was the most exciting, the dare I say, potential. It had so much potential to be as big as League is now. RTSs could have been huge, and StarCraft could have been leading the charge. It could still be incredibly popular and incredibly relevant if Blizzard supported the competitive scene, if Blizzard supported the game in any way at all. I mean, Blizzard really had a lot of willful negligence that I kind of left the StarCraft scene pretty early to hop onto the MOBA hype train when it was occurring in like 2009. So I didn't really pay that much attention to StarCraft's final years. And I apologize if I'm offending any StarCraft fans out there when I say its final years, because StarCraft 2, I mean, it still has another expansion, right? That to be determined it will eventually come out. But it's a game that is kind of dead when you compare it to how popular it was before. When you compare it to what a massive esport it was to what it is now, it is dead by comparison. And that is mostly from Blizzard's willful negligence, unfortunately, right? Excuse me. I think that's, if League of Legends is going to die in any way, I think that's going to be how it happens. If League of Legends is ever going to die, or if it's ever going to really start declining in popularity, then it's going to have to be from Riot either being woefully negligent of what it is that the community wants. It can't just be something as small as sandbox mode or replays. It has to be something huge, like the game is incredibly imbalanced and Riot refuses to fix it. Not just in the sense of, oh, my champion is too weak, my champion is too strong, but like if there are some major anti-competitive elements that are introduced to the game and Riot just is somehow completely blind to them and refuses to listen to the community when we tell them to fix it, that's how League of Legends is going to die if it ever does. I think the interesting thing about League of Legends, though, and why it is that I personally think it will last for quite a while, I think that, I mean, at least, yeah, I don't want to give a specific number to it, but I think it will at least last 5 more years with being a super popular game. It will probably last 20 or 30 years total, in terms of just like being a game that you can go play, even if it isn't as popular 20 years down the road as it is nowadays. Sorry, my nose is a little itchy here. That might be a little bit of a crazy thing to say, but I think if Riot does sort of maintain the things that they've done quite well, the interesting thing about League of Legends is a lot of video games, you buy them on release, right? A lot of video games like Call of Duty, they're a game that comes out and a lot of people buy it on release, and that's when it's most popular, and it eventually declines as the years go by. The player base declines, they move on to the next installment, and eventually there's only a few that remain. But League of Legends, when League of Legends released, it did not have the biggest level of popularity, right? I mean, most of us did not start playing League of Legends on release. League of Legends feels much more like a sport in that sense. Not to, like a lot of people, whenever you say sport and compare a video game to a sport, people say, oh, you can't compare the athletic whatever that it takes to play a sport. which I won't even get into. But like, I played plenty of sports in my day. My name's GBay99 because I'm a huge fan of the Green Bay Packers, the American football team, right? So I think League of Legends is a sport in the sense that it's not really a video game that has a release date that eventually comes and then everyone plays it and then everyone leaves eventually as they move on to other video games. League of Legends is a sport in that it's a game that exists and people come and go as they please. And people get into it, and then they get really into it, and they play it for years, and they enjoy it for years, and then maybe eventually they move on to other interests. They get married and have kids, and they can't afford to play it all the time anymore. All they can do is end up watching the LCS on Sunday, right? Like that's kind of what League of Legends feels much more like. It's not necessarily a video game that has a release date and then everyone plays it and then eventually moves on to other video games. It feels much more like a game that just sort of exists the same way that basketball exists out there, the same way tennis exists. And you might not play tennis every single day, but a lot of people get into tennis and then eventually move on from tennis as they're a kid. And then new kids get into tennis or basketball or soccer or football, whatever example you want to give. That's how I view League of Legends in a lot of ways. And that's what I kind of say, or what I mean when I say that it's a bit more like a sport. It's a game that exists, and if Riot doesn't do anything to screw up the competitiveness of it or tamper with the formula that gets so many people hooked and keeps so many players for so long playing the game, then I think League will be around for quite a while, to say the least. I don't want to say any specific number, because if I say like 30 years down the road, League will still be here, a lot of you will say, well, that's bullshit. There's no way League will be around for more than 4 more years. But I think League can be around for quite a while if Riot doesn't do anything to specifically screw the game up, to screw up the competitiveness. They can make mistakes like, building it on Adobe Air, not expecting it to be the biggest game in the world, and then they have to make a new client that takes forever, and they can't get replays out till they get a new client. Or they can make mistakes where they don't understand how important a sandbox mode is to a lot of players, but I think it will be around for quite a while, to say the least. And I guess I'll go ahead and end it there before I keep on coughing and sniffling. Sorry if that was a little annoying in today's video. I hope you guys all enjoyed watching today's video. You can, of course, leave all your comments in the comments down below. I've been rambling on for 12 and a half minutes, so you can leave your own ramblings in the comments down below. I hope you guys all enjoyed, though. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for making it to the end of today's video if you're listening to my voice now. I will see you all tomorrow, but until then, good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.